Yeah. Welcome to Ghosts, I guess, where two Canadian ladies get together to talk about weird supernatural shit that doesn't seem to have a place in normal conversation. We talk about our own experiences, invite other guests to share theirs, and at the end of every episode, we will discuss how much our conversation and stories convinced us, or didn't, to believe in the paranormal. So, do we believe in ghosts? It's hard to say, but please join us as we talk about it anyway.
Woo!
Woo! Ghosties!
Woo! I can see Luna behind the laptop, and I can see her like little pucker to get ready for a bark, and I'm like, don't do it. Don't do it. I think there's
a squirrel.
Anyway.
Dogs love their squirrels. They love them.
Anyway. I'll just jump right into it.
Please.
What do you think? Okay. I'm going to start here, Rachel. What would you say if I told you that I can prove to you beyond a reasonable doubt, like it'll hold up in court, with science, that human consciousness can survive beyond permanent bodily death, aka life after death? What would you say?
Well, I think I would be it was very compelling to know what evidence would prove a theory that I already kind of believed in, if that makes sense. That's something
awesome.
It's something that I feel, I think we've talked about it before. I feel pretty strongly that that's the case. And so it would be cool to, I guess, hear the science behind it.
Listen, I want to know what that's like to just feel something and have that be enough. And I'm doing this in therapy where I think Heather is just like done with me. She's just like, listen, get out of your head. Here's what we're going to do. You're just going to like write down your feelings every day and just feel your feelings. And so I'm like really struggling because I'm sitting there. I'm like, what's the feeling?
Oh.
I am mad.
I've been there.
I am happy. Like, I have no idea. Anyway, so like, of course, what do? I go on this like journey to dig deeper into science and more in my head.
The exact opposite of what you're supposed to do.
So she's not going to be impressed. She's not going to be impressed.
I don't think you're supposed to aim to impress your therapist.
But
I
need to.
I think that's another level. I think that they want to see you progress, but I feel like that's kind of like that, type A, high achieving.
I want to progress to impress her.
Yeah.
Damn it.
That's the purpose of it. It's not to find peace within. It's to impress.
I don't
your
give a
therapist.
I don't give a that. Okay, so good answer. I'll rate that an A+. I love it. So I'm excited to be talking about this today because it was a very long time in the making. Pretty cool journey. I was actually on our Ghosts, I Guess Instagram. Follow us, ghost.i.guess. And a really cool page popped up. It was clearly targeted to me because the focus was on discussing scientific research that has gone into studying the shit we talked about on here, basically, which is like life after death, consciousness, ghosties, whatever, all distilled down into like really easily absorbed snippets, which is great for my ADHD brain. So I followed the account. And then one day they posted something cool. They said that there's something called the Bigelow Institute for Consciousness Studies, or BICS. You're smirking.
I just think about Deuce Bigalow, Mel Bigelow. I mean, like, how could you not with the name Bigelow?
Bigelow. I love it. I love the name.
I mean, obviously that name existed before the movie, so I'll give it some validity and not laugh. But
let's not laugh at this man and think that he's a male gigolo. But now that's all I can see.
He might be doing both. We don't know. People contain multitudes.
Okay, so BICS is not about a Bigelow, the gigolo. It is about an aerospace engineer, Robert T. Bigelow. He founded
I'm going to get the sillies out.
No, please keep the sillies. I live for them.
Okay.
I live for them.
He's a scientist, and that's just his name. Go ahead.
Robert T. Bigelow. Uh-huh. Okay. He founded the Bigelow Institute for Consciousness Studies, BICS, in April 2020, basically when the world ended. He had nothing else to do, right? Let's just form this institution to support research into both the survival of human consciousness after physical death and, based on data from such studies, the nature of the afterlife. Right up my alley. For decades, Robert T. Bigelow has supported serious investigations into consciousness and manifestations of unusual phenomena that are not yet understood by science. Why does that matter? In 2021, BICS held an essay contest called Absolute Proof of Life After Death. Pretty cool. The essay contest was a massive global endeavor that began with 1,300 applications from all continents that resulted in final submission, 204 essays, each with up to 25,000 words from 38 countries. There were 7 outstanding experts. I should know who they are, but I don't. Who decided
We only care about Bigelow.
Yeah, only the Deuce. Who decided on 29 winners with $1.8 million in prize money. So he's a wealthy man.
Wow.
Or he was before he gave away all his money. And he awarded it at a prize, like a gala in Las Vegas. Like, if I had known about that, I would have gone.
So just point of clarity here, because I was listening, but sorry, he won or someone won and he gave them the money?
No, BICS, held this essay contest.
Oh, BICS did it. Gotcha.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Yep.
And everybody wrote their essay, Absolute Proof of Life After Death, and 29 winners. Right? So they said it was a critical turning point in the field that established, beyond a reasonable doubt, the proof for the survival of human consciousness after permanent bodily death. So how I got into this, as part of the contest, they compiled 28 essays, over 40 authors, into 5 books. Can you see it behind me?
Yeah, I can.
They're gorgeous. In her post on Instagram, which led me to BICS in the first place, she shared that this compilation of essays was where she started her journey and exploration into paranormal, and she wanted to share that BICS was giving away free books.
Oh.
Yeah. And all you had to do was email them, and they would ship the books to you for free. So
this bitch got the books.
This bitch emailed. This bitch emailed. And I was like, is this a scam? Here's my address.
Did somebody say free?
Here's my address, my social insurance number. Yeah. My date of birth.
The name
Send
of
me
my
some free
firstborn.
books.
Yeah.
Send me some free books. But I got a response back, and they said, yeah, you can have some free books. What's your address? And I was like, Canada? And they were like, no, we're not shipping to Canada. And I was like, but can I pay for you to ship? And they were like, we don't know how to do that. So
just go to the post office.
We can't do that. We're Bigelow only authorized US.
I see.
So you know what I did?
You shipped them to the States.
I shipped them to the States, and I drove to the United States of Americas. And I got my fucking books.
The commitment.
Yeah, this is big. Hello.
Well, I want to thank you.
I'm very excited
for doing that.
They're gorgeous.
Now we get to hear about it.
You really do. So
I do wonder if you were to get the books but not for free and actually just pay for the books, would the cost of that be less than the cost to drive down and go get them?
Oh,
Let's
God,
not
yeah.
think about it.
No.
Let's not think about that.
These books are very beautiful. Do you want to look at them? They're beautiful. They're beautiful.
Next time I visit.
I don't even know where to buy. Okay, whatever. I love them. And then I was like, why would this man do this? Why is he doing this? And then I cracked open the book, and this was the dedication. I wish to dedicate this assembly of 5 books to my dear wife for over 55 years, Diane M. Bigelow, who passed over February 19th, 2020. Incarnated, she was a very beautiful, capable, and unusual person. In a discarnate state, soon after her passing, she gave to me and others several physical demonstrations that were specifically identifiable to her and prove that she strongly survived. God bless her for these gifts. Isn't that beautiful?
It is really beautiful.
You know what, Rachel? If I passed and someone called me beautiful, capable, and unusual, I would hunt them and give them lottery winning numbers or something. Like that's, the best compliment.
I don't know that I would have picked those words out of the ether.
Okay.
But I think that they all, it makes sense. I would say all of those are applicable to you.
What words would you pick then?
I'd have to think about it. But what I'm saying is, I feel like those are very good descriptors for the person that you are. So I can understand why you would resonate with them.
I love it. Unusual. He had to throw that in there.
Definitely you are unusual. No question about it. But in the best way. No one who is usual is interesting. They call them basic bitches.
Babies.
Mm-hmm. We ain't got time for that. Yeah. We ain't got time for that. No, ma'am.
So I dug in.
Mm-hmm.
This is where we are today, sharing with you and our audience this information. I think with that, we should dedicate this episode, and hopefully many more to come, to Robert Bigelow, the Deuce, and his unusual wife, Diane. What do you think?
I think that's really nice. I love that we're calling him the Deuce. I wonder how you would feel about it. Is he still alive?
I didn't hear anything about his death, but I also couldn't find whatever. All right. I'll Google it. Sure. Okay, so what have I done so far? I've picked out one of the essays in the first book, and my hope was to distill it for audience consumption in this episode and discuss it. The essay I chose was called An Immortal Stream of Consciousness, the Scientific Evidence for the Survival of Consciousness After Permanent Bodily Death. Boom. It was written by Dr. Nicholas Rouleau. Dr. Rouleau is a neuroscientist and bioengineer with a research focus on cognition in lab-grown brain tissues. This is the coolest thing I've ever heard in my entire life. He earned his PhD from Dr. Michael Persinger, who is very famous for the similar type of work, by demonstrating that brain tissues display material-like properties that filter electromagnetic fields. And he's currently a professor of psychology at Algoma in Canada. Very cool. Very cool. But having said all that, I need to give a disclaimer. You're going to see this one coming, or maybe not. What do I look like? A scientist? I'm not. And this essay made that really painfully clear. It hurt my ego a bit. Because I was the
thesaurus out, dictionary.
Yeah. And it's too long to read 3 or 4 times, but I had to do it anyway. And I just greatly overestimated my abilities and my intellect and my free time to review this.
I think challenging yourself in that way will only expand your intellect.
Yeah.
That's my rebuttal.
Sure. It also hurt my ego.
Okay, well.
I'm going to talk to Heather about that.
Maybe leave your ego at the door.
Oh, what door? Okay.
Front door.
So I was able to partially understand what he was saying.
Right.
80%, enough. Okay. But once the essay started saying things and I quote, the product of its dipole moment, 8 times 10 to the power of 22, A times M to the power of 2, and average intensity, 5 times 10 to the power of 5, whatever T means, is about 4 times 10 to the power of 18 joules. I was like, no.
Yeah.
I'm not meant to do this.
I listened to maybe like 2 seconds of it and I'm like, this doesn't.
And it was an important part of the essay. And I was like, I can't. He seems legit. He's not going to lie to me, right? Like, I understand that he thinks he came up with something here.
It's like, if you are that intelligent to break it down into science and mathematics, that's probably crucially important for verification of proof for like other intellectual scientists and mathematicians. But you would also want to be able to explain to the average person. So it should almost be like a little star. So it's in normal words and a little star that says like, check schedule A. And then, the scientist can go take a look at that. The person who could actually understand that could go look at that, That would be better.
Yeah.
You gotta know your audience. What's his name again? The guy wrote it?
Rouleau. Yeah, and basically...
More like Runeau.
Runeau. No, he's fantastic. He, in the essay, he reviewed, hundreds of years of theories and research and took theories and his own research and other people's research and summarized it and then, tied everything together at the end in a pretty bow. And I was like, girl, you know what he's doing. Okay, I have questions for you.
Okay.
And before we get started, give me your gut reaction to each. Try not to overthink it.
Okay.
And where normally I'm like, this is an open, exploratory discussion, no wrong answers. There are wrong answers because I read them and I know the truth.
No pressure.
Okay. Number 1, do you think
Is this going to hurt my ego? Okay,
no.
Anyway, go ahead.
Do you think consciousness and your soul are ultimately the same thing with different words?
Yep.
You think, I'm writing this, breaking down. Yes. You think consciousness and your soul are the same thing?
Well, actually,
or not?
No one's actually just fully asked me that. So I think my gut is yes, but your soul is innately who you are. That's your identity. That's a special little spark that is you. I'm sure the scientist is going to say that they're not the same, but I want to believe they're the same because if consciousness goes on, I want to still be me going on. Maybe
Beautiful.
I'm not aware of it. Maybe I'm not oh, that's Rachel, but I still want to be me going into wherever the next thing is.
You're going to like Rouleau.
Okay, great.
Do you think consciousness is in your heart or your brain?
I don't think it's anywhere.
Okay.
Let me just think about that for a second.
Let me ask you the next question then. Do you think your brain produces your consciousness? The little neurons firing in your brain, people call it the butterflies of the soul, are creating your consciousness.
Well, no, because we already know that consciousness goes on even when the brain's dead. So no. But I want to go back to the heart and brain question. I feel like your heart is an organ that just keeps your body alive. It's really important. I literally just got a tattoo of anatomical heart on my arm. But I don't think my identity, when you focus on who you are innately, when you just take a moment to think about that, it's not coming from my heart. It's not even really coming from my brain. It's coming from I don't know, my conscious. Sure. Right here, my third eye.
Your third eye.
No, that's a different thing.
Okay, I have to now distill this 110-page essay from a neuroscientist down to just some simple parts. I'm going to do okay.
I so believe in you.
Thanks. Number 1, he wants to try to outline why the survival of consciousness after brain death is not only possible, but probable.
Okay.
Beyond a reasonable doubt, which was really cool. That's a high bar, and it does take a bit of navigating through and accepting very important terms and theories before he ties it all together in a pretty bow. So we will do that together today. He explains additionally that he can demonstrate that our understanding of brain function has changed radically over the past century and now includes biophysical mechanisms that can explain survival, not only survival, but also related observations, which has classically been categorized as PSI phenomenon. And that psi phenomenon is like telekinesis, mediumship, ghosties, whatever.
Oh, I see. Okay.
So if I say psi phenomenon, it's just like the paranormal shit.
Okay.
Let's start where he started, which is the definition of life. He drills it down to the cellular level. While not all cells are created equally, and they're not equally important in this definition, essentially it all comes back to the cell membrane and how it orders things like within it. So to quote him, because he puts it best, the cell membrane acts as a selective bridge between the inside of the cell, where the chemical reactions are highly controlled, and the outside, where they are largely spontaneous or random. Because membranes can separate charged particles, also called ions, cells store an electric charge, like a battery. That can be actively discharged to help them divide, proliferate, or communicate with their neighbors, whatever. The boundary of the membrane is what distinguishes the living cell from its non-living environment. And he gives a really cool example. Consider the viruses that must cross the important threshold of this cell membrane to suddenly become activated and lifelike with, bad consequences to our bodies. When membranes are dissolved, cells and their environments become assimilated and life is non-existent. So life is therefore a state of ordered conditions maintained by a thin and delicate cell membrane that divides the world into living and non-living parts. And overall, he does touch on the point that death is a process, which is a huge topic, one that I really love, but we don't get into it here. It's not super critical. Most importantly, he says that where life, death, and consciousness interact is, as we understand it, in the brain, so not the heart. It's in the brain. And while
It's in the brain.
And while the human body is a highly interconnected system and the heart might be necessary for its function, very important, the brain is the only known organ in the human body that is sufficient for consciousness. And that's very important. It seems like it goes without saying, but it's very important to outline. So there is no reason to suppose that a brain supported by a series of artificial organs could not sustain consciousness. And what he means by that loosely is that if you could keep like a whole body alive, pumping on artificial organs and things with only the brain intact, you would have consciousness. And the same can't be said for like heart or kidney or whatever. And then you think, okay, so like what is consciousness then? And what's the soul? Consciousness, this definition is from external to it's not written in his essay. I had to find it. Consciousness is a pure, Consciousness is a pure subjective experience and the entry point for everything we know and can know about the external world and our internal states. It is the stream of mental chatter that defines our point of view relative to events in the world. Consciousness is fundamentally the thing we refer to when we say the words I and me. And for all practical purposes, it's the soul under a different name. So his argument is they're both the same. And consciousness is what you feel when it's I and that special spark. And actually that was right from the essay. I couldn't find it at first, and then I did find it. So
I got that one right.
You got it right. You're winning. You got it more right than I did. How are the soul and consciousness the same? He equates this to the phlogiston theory of combustion. It's spelled Phlogiston. Have you heard of it?
I haven't. But tell me.
Can you guess? That's kind of fun. Just guess. Phlogiston.
Nope.
You're never going to. It is the weirdest thing ever. It is a very old and incorrect theory of how things burn, essentially. Which was that
Rachel Burns.
Rachel Burns. You're Rachel Phlogiston.
Now everyone knows my name. Anyways, go ahead.
Okay. It's that flammable materials contained a substance, this is like in the olden days, called phlogiston, which is the Greek word for burn, that was released upon combustion. So how is that related to the soul? That's very weird. He says that just as the phlogiston theory of combustion led to the discovery of oxygen, the ancient idea of the soul has given way to a focused science of consciousness and its relationship to the essence of human life. While consciousness and the related mechanisms that allow experience or internal representations to arise from matter are not fully understood, its existence is certain. So before we knew about oxygen and all these scientific pathways that make something burn, we just thought like, ooh, phlogiston. Yeah.
Magic.
He does talk a lot about how like the second something becomes, everything's spooky until the second it becomes scientifically defined. And then we like knock our brains and we're like, blah, how did we not think about that this entire time? Like it just becomes so like part of our understanding and we just feel dumb for calling it spooky.
Yeah, it's like ancient civilizations having rituals that they thought were important to please
gods,
which create, would make it rain or make it sun, it's, and not having any idea that, I don't know, that's just the human trying its hardest to explain what is inexplainable, right?
Yeah, they're explaining precipitation. I don't know. Maybe if I pray, there will be precipitation. And now, instead of calling it praying to the gods, we call it precipitation.
That's right.
Okay. It's a very important theory. I like it. Another term that was new to me and is it's very complex, like more than I could ever get into here. It's neural correlates of consciousness, or NCCs. I'm going to call it NCCs. So the neural correlates of consciousness have been defined as the minimal neural mechanisms that are together necessary and sufficient for experiencing any conscious percept. And that was a definition established by another researcher named Koch. I have to boil it down. This is very oversimplified, but it's something seen when we know consciousness can occur. So like the little flicker occurs when something is capable of experiencing like a visual stimulus or feels love or hears something or whatever. These are not casual. They're just coupled and correlated with. So I'm thinking of like, you're looking at, I don't know, brain waves on a machine, and you know that this particular brain wave in this area means that the minimum state of consciousness has been correlated with that production. Doesn't mean that they're actually experiencing something. It's just like that minimum threshold. NCCs. The brain output.
Okay. I don't really get it. Like, I understand what you're saying, but like,
it's
like when, okay, maybe it's because I don't understand what it's like relating to. So it's like,
the tough part is it's all like waves and frequencies that he's measuring on. And it's very complicated shit. But basically it's like something like, that is seen when we know consciousness can occur. And a point of evidence.
This is like scientific indicators.
Yes. So maybe this waveform is shown when we know that consciousness can occur.
Okay.
Like the minimal neural mechanisms that are required. That takes us to a bigger question. It's the biggest one in the entire essay and the foundation for all of his research and where we're going with this. And I call it productivity versus transmission. So survival of consciousness is threatened by death if brains produce consciousness. So if the neurons that are firing in your little skullet right now actually created and produced the soul, aka consciousness, if that were true, you cannot survive brain death. Consciousness died and it's not accessible by any means after death.
Right.
So he argues that the brain is an electromagnetic organ that transmits consciousness. And it's like a critical part of the entire argument. So we should break it down.
Okay.
Envision a radio.
Yep.
And I picture those little like rectangular, brown, dusty ass clock radio alarm clocks that are on your bedside. Do you know them? Beep, beep. Those. They give me
definitely
anxiety.
had like an old-timey one in my head as well.
Yes. Yeah, that's what you should picture. Gives everyone anxiety, just the sound of it. The radio is just like a unique box with the unique function of receiving and transmitting music and sound. It is not creating or producing the music. If we pour water on it and it still works, it might crackle and clank and possibly, produce some music. But the music is still there and trying to get through.
Gotcha.
Okay.
It's a good analogy.
It might come out different, might look different, but it's still there trying to get through. This is transmissive function. Okay. Productive function would be, I clearly have a 2-year-old daughter. Production function would be if there was a tiny little band of fairies living inside your clock radio that come alive to play a jingle every time you turn the knob on. Very simplified, right?
Yeah.
I think you need to compare my words of the fairy with Rouleau's and tell me who said it best.
I think yours is
You haven't heard
much
it yet.
easier. Oh, okay. Sorry.
Okay.
I thought everything prior to your example of the fairies was what he was saying.
No, well, here he's going to summarize it. The best available evidence for survival is the significant observational and experimental data that indicate the brain is an organ that receives and emits electromagnetic radiation in ways that are consistent with the transmissive model of brain function that positions consciousness as independent and at least partially separate from the brain itself. Boom. Mic drop. Rouleau. That's what he said.
I like the way you explained it better.
Okay.
Because my brain didn't wander when you explained it.
Well, yeah. Because fairies.
If you could pair up with a science person and you could be rewriting the science into something that a normal person would understand, I think you guys would be unstoppable.
But then, Rachel, this is what I have tried to do in this essay.
No, you're doing it. You're absolutely doing it.
But then I realize, I'm like, oh, that would be so easy. But then I have to realize that I need to understand the science. And it's really fucking hard.
I think you're doing great.
I wanted to call the man and be like, what does this mean? Why is that important? Because he'll say a bunch of stuff and then he'll be like, as you can see, that proves without a doubt. I'm like, but how? Anyway. I got most of it. So this entire model of brain function was outlined by the father of psychology, American psychology, whatever, William James, he was very prominent. You might have heard his name, psychologist, philosopher. Was at Harvard. He's great. James gave a lecture at Harvard on the subject of human immortality, using transmissive function as the core of his thesis. So transmissive function could not be proven in James's time. But he also countered with the fact that productive theory could also not be demonstrated, but was the most popular prevailing one. And it's still true to this day. And yet it was still the most popular scientific opinion and is today. Why is that? because it eliminates the spooky dookie. Scientists don't like the spooky dookie. Over a century of neuroscientific research has been conducted since James's lecture, providing empirical support for his theory, which makes it like incredibly compelling, and yet still the productive theory is predominant. Because we're and like
just to make, because remember to the listener, I didn't have any none of this was discussed at all prior to recording, so it's new information for me as well. So I'm sure there's some of you that are like, maybe this is a good thing to clarify. So essentially, productive theory is that the soul is connected to the brain function essentially.
The soul is created by the neurons firing and is produced by that.
Right. Okay. And that when the brain dies, it can't produce that anymore.
It can't fire, so it's gone.
The soul's gone.
Yeah.
So we die, we're gone.
Yeah.
That's the productive theory.
And the productive model is predominant today. And it was it was predominant then as well. And William James said, like, why is this? You can't, we can't prove transmissive function right now, but you can't prove productive either. So why are you choosing it? They just dismiss anything associated with like paranormal, like, ooh, we can't take transmissive theory seriously because where's it coming from?
Like, I'm not a religious person. I was raised with religion. I don't know. I have a lot of complicated feelings and thoughts on it. We're going to get into it right now because it's not super related. But what I was going to say is that what this makes me think of, it's almost like if you took a piece of paper of how, like, the difference between atheism and believing in something on top of transmission, function, and productive theory, it would be pretty similar. Like, I can draw correlations. Now, I'm not saying that means that religious people are right and whatever, but I think it's very easy to just and again, I'm not out here to insult an atheist either, because I said complicated feelings on what happens, but atheists are going to say, no, like, you die, that's it. Because
listen,
it's easier to understand.
What you're saying is so relevant. It's so relevant. Yeah. I just watched an Instagram someone interviewing, talking about how they're an atheist. And they said, look, if you destroy all of the books, all the Bibles, all the whatevers, and started fresh as a civilization, all of that, all those religious theories and whatever, it wouldn't be produced again. But if you destroy all of the science, well, this is just like a very simplified version of his argument. You destroyed all the religious documents. You're never going to hear about like Noah's Ark or whatever again, right? You won't hear about it. Something else might show up in its place, but that will be gone. That specific thing will be gone. If you destroyed all of the science in 100 years, it would come back in the same exact way. And that's his argument for not believing God. What that idiot ignored was evidence like Rouleau. If you destroyed all of Rouleau's evidence and compilation, it will come back exactly as it is right now. And it does hold space for God or gods or whatever. So I just want to call that man and be like, close, but no cigar.
It's also just wrong. Like, I'm reading a book. It's Sapiens. I can't remember the author, but I've been reading it slowly because it's, again, kind of packed full of information, but very interesting. And the reason why religion or anything like anything culturally happens is because humans need to be able to connect, to work together. So what he's saying makes no sense, because you take all that away, humans still are the same innately. So they're still going to have to come together and work together. So they're going to have their stories, their traditions, their religions, their beliefs. Like, that's going to happen. It's a social function. So I don't think he even I think what he meant was like very specific stories and thoughts
right?
Okay,
like
so
gay people can't marry because, like those type of things.
Yeah. But that's, to me, like, as someone who grew up in religion and has complicated feelings about it, that's not religion to me. That's not faith to me. That's something man-made. That's not anything to me.
Yeah.
Like, it exists, but so do murderers. Like, anyways, kind of went on a tangent. I'll just say that that's what it kind of made me think of. It's like, the scientists are saying, I can't believe in what I can't see and at the time definitively prove. So thus, I'm correct, which doesn't really make a lot of sense.
It's weird. It's weird. And it just shows that science dismisses anything associated with something potentially spooky dooky. Like they want to describe everything. And it's a little impatient, science is, I feel. Anyway.
Just one moment. So sorry. I'm so sorry to have interrupted. Precious is in the room with me. And again, I'm not in my usual place. And so there's not really any cozy beds for her to sit on. And there's like a little table. And under the table is a garbage bag full of like paper shredding. And she was getting herself in on top of the bag of shredding, I guess, because it's like,
what a hamster.
Like a pillow. And I had to pull her out because she's already created a bit of a mess as a result of them. We have to clean up. So I pull her out. I'm going to go open the door to let her out. She just starts crawling back in again. She's insane.
I like her. She's driven by comfort.
Her need to nest.
Yeah.
She loves nesting.
Love her. Okay. Well, we're back.
Yep.
I wanted to talk about another example of how science dismisses anything with spooky dooky stuff. Just like James, there was a guy named Hans Berger. Hans Berger. He had a strong paranormal experience that he couldn't explain. It just like knocked his life literally into another trajectory. He focused all of his attention to figuring it out. Ultimately, it led to the invention of the EEG, which measures like brain activity.
Oh, yes. Which is like hugely important.
Very important. According to Berger, psychical energy was distinct but ultimately conserved, not created arising as a transformed version of other kinds of generic physical energy. So we now know that the psychical energy that he measured with his EEG device was, in fact, the dynamic and complex electromagnetic field of the brain. The brain was fundamentally an electromagnetic organ, which is to say a collection of tissues that readily emit, respond to, and interact with electromagnetic fields. So the scientific community spent the next century using EEG to characterize the neural correlates of consciousness, NCCs, understand the brain structure, whatever, but the results of their experiments were consistently interpreted using the lens of productive brain function. So while they embraced like the technological output of this new EEG device, the theory that led to its discovery, its implicit assumptions, and the general implications of transmission were discarded as part of like, it's just a coincidence. It has no meaning or truth. So we take your little EEG and use it and it serves us, but what got us here and got us to the EEG, the experience and the underlying transmission function theory, let's not get into that. Too spooky. So anyways, have you fully accepted that the brain is transmissive?
I mean, I don't think I had the words for that prior to us talking about it, but yeah, like that's...
Let's prove it.
Okay.
Let's prove it. We know that the brain has to operate in a very specific way for consciousness to exist after death. And Rouleau actually uses some of his own research to support the idea of transmission versus production. Okay. So he did studies with fixed post-mortem human brains. So dead brains, like they're dead. And they're fixed, meaning he applied a chemical, whatever, that keeps every cell exactly where it was when it died. but they can't
Okay.
fire.
Right.
And it shows, and I quote, that a transmissive model could be mediated by the material-like properties of the brain tissues that filter induced voltage fluctuations caused by natural and artificial EMP exposures. So what does that really mean? And why is it important? It means he took those brains that were frozen in time structurally, but without internal productive function, meaning the cells couldn't fire and speak to each other, nothing. And he applied different kinds of external stimuli, and he found that the different parts of the brain filter the stimuli differently. Okay? And so one part of the brain that it filters is completely unique to other parts, which means it was doing something.
Mm-hmm.
He also found something by accident, which was that over several years of data, like he looked back and he noticed that even on days where he did nothing to the brains, he just measured the voltage over the brain, he got something called ordered noise. So if you look back, he could make a correlation between the brains, the dead brains, and whatever geomagnetic field was doing that day. So he felt confident.
That's weird.
Right? So he felt confident
Yeah.
that there was a connection between the dead tissues and the Earth's magnetic field, which would definitely support transmissive function, like a little antenna expertly crafted.
Okay, I just have to that's blown my mind a little bit because
It's so cool.
I've always just felt, just from experiences that have happened when you're with people, or just weird little, well, that's strange, like that we could connect in that way. Something as basic as doing our little psychic test that we do. But I've always felt that sort of like, because we are energy and energy is all around us, I've always thought that we can somehow connect into what is around us, which can then connect us to each other. And that's a whole other thing.
But he talks about that. He proves that.
Yeah. Okay. That's wild. Because what you're telling me is that the brain there, it's dead, but it's still responding to the outside.
And responding in unique ways in different parts of the brain. So it is ordered. It is not like you can apply that to like any inanimate object and it's not going to be ordered in this way.
No.
Yeah, he gets into connectedness. I don't talk a lot about it in here, but he pretty much proves it through. And it's crucial to his kind of thesis that we are all connected. It's just crazy. I had something else when you were saying, what were you talking about? Oh, basically how you want to be around certain energies or whatever. That's why I'm doing this podcast from my ghost corner. Because I started, after reading this, I started to think like maybe it's like the electronics over here that's causing weird portals to open or whatever. There's some like focus something here that's, I don't know. Who knows? Anyway, I don't want to run out of time. Rouleau said that over 3 years, his buddy Persinger, which was like the scientist that he got a PhD with, Persinger, and himself designed and executed dozens of experiments with chemically fixed post-mortem human brains, searching for extra cerebral signs of consciousness. We hypothesized that brains could passively receive and process electromagnetic information, because reception would be dependent upon the antenna-like material structures of the brain rather than their active neurophysiology. So rather than their neurons firing, life would not be a requisite condition for transmissive function. We predicted that by measuring human brains that were chemically fixed shortly after clinical death, it would be possible to detect signals that could be filtered by the brain to express consciousness. So NCCs. Because any brain activity associated with action potentials, so that's like the neurons, would be eliminated by fixation, we hypothesized that what dynamics remained would constitute evidence for transmission and therefore the survival of at least one type of brain function following death. Needle electrodes were embedded into the cerebral cortices of fixed post-mortem human brains to record low amplitude microvolt fluctuations. Mm. So this is what I was saying earlier, but whereas all conducive substrates, brain or not, can express electrical noise as slight voltage fluctuations, organized patterns among the noise reflective of living like brain signatures would not emerge in all substrates. So he found promising results despite significant levels of electrical noise associated with the measurement of voltage fluctuations within postmortem tissues. Reliable, so he can do it over and over again, oscillatory patterns were apparent. That is, the electrical fingerprint of each cortical region was unique, not uniform. Therefore, whatever he was measuring was not random, and the material properties of the brain were modulating the electrical noise in ways that other materials were not. It's crazy. And it's great. Like, this is the just surface. I'm sure if you're a neuroscientist, you're looking at his research going, ooh, interesting, at an even deeper level. But the argument put forward here is that brain cannot eliminate consciousness because consciousness is not a product of the brain. Rather, consciousness and other brain functions are explained by EMF brain interactions, and these are not wholly dependent on the activities of living cells. To formalize his theory of survival, consciousness survives permanent bodily death because the electronic magnetic forces that give rise to experience and thought are not created by brain tissues. They are only received, interpreted, filtered, and transmuted by them. So there are literally pages and pages of other examples and experiments, and taken together, they help support his claim and tie up loose ends to make it feel like not only is the transmissive model probable, it's also, or possible even, it's also proven, and consciousness after death is probable. So all of his other talking after he goes into these experiments to prove transmission, he ties everything else together to say, hey, it's not just that consciousness is there, it's that it's probable that consciousness can exist after that. So my question to you, and he describes this, and I can go into it. First gut instinct, where is it? Where is consciousness?
Literally, I'm jotting down questions as you were talking. And my first question is, does he hypothesize what is creating consciousness?
Yes.
It's okay, I have no idea. That's literally why I wrote it down. I was if I had to guess, something to do with energy, something to do with, I don't like using energy is kind of a hoo-hoo word, but I think you were calling it the electromagnetic stuff and all of that. I feel reacting with us on a cellular level.
So cool. Okay. So the proven theory of transmissive function of the brain opens us wide up to the possibility of life after death in a way that is meaningful to us in the discussion of life after death. So in other words, a way to return and experience that consciousness. So it's not just that consciousness exists somewhere after death. It opens us up to the discussion of tapping into it again. So it's not just floating around doing nothing with no personal specifics to it. He said there are really popular and long-held beliefs that reconcile now with his theory, including reincarnation, the idea of ascension and descension, persisted consciousness, aka ghosties, and unity of consciousness with others. He said that these themes of survival have now inspired more scientific hypotheses which can be empirically tested. So one of those, we'll start, this is where he goes with it. Someone named H.P. Blavatsky was a philosopher and mystic who borrowed from these theories to form her own narrative of consciousness called Akasha.
Okay.
Rouleau says, Akasha, a term derived from the Sanskrit word for space or sky, places all intent, consciousness, memory, thought, and will in a pervasive and ethereal plane. The Akashic record was also thought to be the place from which radiates the first logos, wherein logos refers in context to sound or speech. Blavatsky's idea is essentially a reformed version of the Hindu concept of Akasha as the eternal and imperceptible substrate of the universe. So he even described there's an ancient Indian harp-like device called Akasa, and it was tied to the tops of trees. And when those trees vibrated from the wind, they said it created the sounds of the universe.
I love that.
It's beautiful, right?
Yeah.
Inspired by this description of Akasha, another philosopher, Ervin Laszlo, I quote, identified analogous concepts in quantum mechanics that he claimed could accommodate evolutionary and cosmological processes as well as consciousness in the Akashic field or a field. A paper from 2020, Rachel, written by someone named Jay Levin, spoke about the possibility of hacking into the Akashic record to serve military intelligence operations. That is an article you can go and read. And they tie the science to how we might be able to tap into the Akashic record to inform our military operations, like intel.
That means that it's not just bullshit. If the military's oh, well, how can we utilize this? Then there's something to it. If it was just bullshit, they wouldn't. I have a whole opinions on the military that we don't need to get into. However, if they're a huge, powerful entity that is always looking at ways to, I guess, protect or create the ultimate weapon, and they wouldn't waste time on something that they thought was just, I know, fairy tales. They just wouldn't.
It's fucking insane. And with every page of this article, there are 5 or 6 sourced references that I can go in and look, and it's a crazy article in and of itself. We don't have time to really get into it here, so I'm just high level, but it's crazy. And Rouleau cites evidence to support that memory and consciousness is stored all around us in our shared electromagnetic environment.
I believe that.
Yeah, this is what he said. If brain function is at least partially dependent on the reception of transmitted EMF signals, there must be at least one source in nature that functions as the transmitter or Zeitgeber. And the environmental source of the cue should be physical and therefore subject to measurement, which is really cool for future research. He says the source of these natural EMFs is the Earth itself. Crazy, right? Some examples. A storm, a really intense storm, has the possibility of wiping out satellites and electronics and has documented, a wealth of biological effects. So, it's overwhelming evidence, and it's found in humans, bats, bees, bacteria, fish, everything. Psychiatric hospital admissions correlate with geomagnetic activity. Epileptic patients with the seizures coming from the temporal lobes or whatever, and frequency of convulsions correlate to geomagnetic activity. I didn't know this at all, but this is so cool and very relevant to us. He says that geomagnetic field fluctuations have always been associated with reliable, meaning they can do it over and over again, reports of post-mortem apparitions, aka ghosts, and other intense paranormal experiences. And guess what? You're going to love this. Those sleep paralysis dreams that we talked about a couple of episodes back, we're is it just nothing or is it something? Those are more than just dreams all along. Geomagnetic activity is associated with sleep states and increased incidences of vivid and bizarre dreams, including sleep paralysis.
Whoa.
So it's like something's opening up and you're able to like tap into something else.
So what you're telling me is that this is essentially scientifically proven that our entire being and how we operate in the world, how our brain works, how our soul works, everything is just connected and essentially created by Earth, by the outside. And am I understanding that correctly?
I think so. And it's like way more in depth than that. He's just showing the linkages, right? Like,
I just think of like certain cultures, or I won't like say because I don't want to speak out of turn, but there's cultures that believe that we have to fully respect the earth. We have to take care of the planet. We have to not do harm. And that it's, I don't know. I feel like that was the most natural earlier religion, we'll say. Not religion is not the right word. Earliest spirituality. And then we've just gotten so far away from that.
He talks a lot about connectedness and where it all comes from. He even says like productive, like nothing's produced in your body. Even the iron in your blood is coming from a fucking star or something like that. Like he talks about how, like, let's not digress, but nothing's produced in your body.
Yeah. It's like how I always say that everything we need comes from the earth.
Yeah.
Like,
I'm mindful of time, like, but can we go to 2:45?
Yeah. It kind of bums me out a little bit though. Cause like, we're just really fucking shit up if that's the case.
Knowledge is power. Knowledge is power. Another example, a remote viewing task involving identifying a target picture by dream content alone was enhanced by reduced geomagnetic activity. So the sources for those last two, if you're interested, are Michael Persinger and Jay Caniza, respectively, and they're titled Geophysical Variables and Behavior. Intense paranormal experiences occur during days of quiet global geomagnetic activity. And the other one is Isolated Sleep Paralysis, Vivid Dreams and Geomagnetic Influences. So this is fun. Persinger detailed a really complicated formula. I said it at the top of this episode and you zoned out. I did too. That, like math, the Earth's magnetic field, so this is what he demonstrated, the Earth's magnetic field has sufficient capacity to represent or store the information within the energy that has been associated with the action potentials that have been generated by every human brain that has existed on the planet. So based upon parameters of magnetic diffusivity, Persinger explained that this holographic-like transcerebral field could potentially activate every brain on the planet over a period of approximately 10 minutes. And then, this is where it gets fucking wild. He argued that the same period of time associated with the duration of REM cycles could account for a functional exchange of information between the geomagnetic field and the human brain during sleep. So a kind of uploading and downloading procedure for brain activity, like a neural form of cloud computing. Like an iCloud, but for eye consciousness. And also, like, is this why my child goes to sleep and wakes up in the morning with brand new words, has a full language burst? Like, she has a language burst in the morning. And you're just like, yeah, sleep is generative. Is it sleep? Or is she downloading information in her sleep from the Akashic record? And like her brain is growing so it can take more things in. It's like forming the right structure to be able to process that information.
Well, and it's also like when there's nothing more pure than a child other than like maybe an animal, but it's like there's no nothing has spoiled their ability to receive, I guess.
Yeah.
There's no noise.
It's friggin' nuts. It's friggin' nuts. Memory was good. So we know that memories are not stored in any one particular area, but rather distributed isotropically across the surface of the cerebral cortex. So if you remove a part of the brain, no particular specific memory is erased, but many or all memories will incur loss or resolution or detail. So the idea...
Any part of the brain, like any specific part that needs to be removed?
So it's like memories aren't stored like right here, you know? It's all over. So the idea and theory of personal memory being uploaded and downloaded external to the brain is actually compatible with how memory and brains function. And then supported by Persinger's like wild mathematical theory that there's enough space in the iCloud or the consciousness. So there are there are pages and pages of other factors and findings that reconcile with his, findings and support this overall theory of consciousness coming from outside the brain, being transmitted, meaning it's coming from somewhere. He talks about connectedness a lot, gives some cool examples, which if you want, I can pull those up next time, and how it's proven through these brain studies. He talks about how psi phenomenon can support his findings and provide a more well-rounded, essentially, argument for survival after death. It adds to it. It's not just transmissive function, but then you have these paranormal experiences and you're like, oh yeah, it could go on in a very specific way. Very important in his discussion is that he talks about how memory works and doesn't work, and suggests that the idea and theory of personal memory being uploaded and download, it's very compatible, right? I think I talked about how we talked about how there was enough space for that to be in there. I'll never understand it. The argument put forward is that brain death cannot eliminate consciousness, because consciousness is not a product of the brain. So rather, consciousness and other brain functions are explained by EMF brain interactions, and they are not wholly dependent. Consciousness survives bodily death because the electromagnetic forces that give rise to experience and thought are created by brain tissues. So, this is what he says.
Wow. Well, that was really good. Thank you for doing all that research. Some of it's kind of blown my mind a little bit. I guess what I was specifically thinking was this, sending our thoughts to the consciousness cloud, or whatever you want to call it.
The Akashic record, a record.
Yeah. And so and you mentioned a little bit, you can essentially, my question is this. So when we die, he's saying there's proof that going through this process, being able to prove this scientifically, could explain PSI.
The psi phenomenon.
Yeah. But I guess my question mark here, maybe this is in other essays or explained by someone else, but it's when we die and our consciousness goes on, we get to I guess what I'm having trouble reconciling with, and maybe it's because of science, but we're always told that the likelihood of us to be here right now in these bodies is you'd have better luck winning the lottery. It's one in a however many chance that we would be here in this moment, in this body, with this consciousness, I guess, with this soul. So, but what I'm hearing is not really. What I'm hearing is when my body dies, I kind of become part of everything again, whether that's the geophysical, geomagnetic, electromagnetic, whatever that looks like, because it's way too much science for me to fully understand, but like I become part of that, or the Akashic
record.
Akashic record. And so then is it like immediately I had the thought of reincarnation. But
Yes.
like, so then what happens though? It's like I choose to be a ghost and just kind of bop around? Or is that just like where I stay until I'm ready to go into the next body? Or am I making the conscious choice to go into the next body? And then also you mentioned there was one, you said it very briefly, so I don't know if you're going to know exactly what I'm talking about, but he said that some people would connect again with other people. So like
Unity.
To me, that's sort of like that idea, that very Christian idea of heaven, of where you die and then you're with your family members again. So I guess all that to say, this is very interesting, and I believe all that's possible, but it's like, you just decide?
No, I don't think he gets into how it works. He just says, okay, we've proven it's possible, and we've also taken all of these other studies together, and it's probable. So not only is it possible, but because of all this paranormal activity and whatever, it's actually probable that there's some form of life after death, and being able to upload, download, all that's very possible. There's room for it. And then...
So I guess I'm asking you what you think, because like by him saying it's possible and everything that you detailed makes me believe that as well too. And honestly, probable. And everything you've said, what do you think's going on? Like, I want your opinion. Like, not necessarily like he's going to say, so this is what happens when we die, because no one can say that until we die. It's the best guess. But like,
I think it's a mix between transmissive and productive function. So there's us, our consciousness in the ether, Akashic record, the I consciousness, and our brains. When it goes in, it mixes with those signals, and it mixes with transmissive and productive function to produce our very unique, specific us. And I do believe that our memories can be uploaded, downloaded, lost, siphoned off, severed, moved around, reincarnated. It's probably just with less whole meaning. Like, it's not Kim as exactly Kim, because that productive function died. It is some of my memories, some of my essence floating and severing and moving. But I believe that we're all one.
Yeah.
We're all just one thing. And then there's maybe a spark inside in that productive function that makes it a unique
individualizes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
when you die, like, maybe not your entire individual thing is gone, because those memories, those other parts of consciousness exist and splice off and move around where they need to be, where they need to go.
I would also be interested. I've brought up the fact that I've done ayahuasca more than a few times when we've recorded. And that experience, I won't get into the nitty-gritty of it, but you do really disconnect from your physical self, and you don't disconnect in a way that like, oh man, I'm so high right now. That's not what I'm talking about. It feels medicinal. It feels spiritual. It feels like you are connecting outside of your physical self, and often coming back with something. And I would say that might be the only real thing that would be similar to an near-death experience, but obviously like near-death experience light, probably, because I'm sure it's much more intense.
You tapped into the Akashic record.
This is what I'm saying.
On ayahuasca, and it told you you're going to be Carly.
Yeah, and that's exactly it. It's like, I guess I'm curious to see, like, doing my own little, like, quick little research, and not to do an entire episode on it, but to come back with it next time we're talking. To be like, I did a Google search with the word ayahuasca and Akashic record to see, like, if there's got to be some sort of connection. And And again, that is a plant that exists on the planet.
It's cool. It's so cool. And like, I read this essay thinking, oh, this is gonna be it. And then I'm not lying. There are hundreds of references of really cool titled articles that I can like dig into and learn more about. And I'm glad we're doing this because I feel like people don't know this and they don't take the time to really think about it. Like really think about it.
Well, we can sit and speculate all we want, but like, and I like that. I like that that's part of our discussions, and I'm sure it will continue. But it's nice to also pair it with, but here's some actual scientific, like, legitimacy to what we're speculating.
Mm-hmm.
Good. Yeah.
Great.
Most def.
So what do we have next for our dear listeners?
Next up is, well, it's the month of September, and what the hell?
It's
the month of October.
It's
October, guys. It's October. September went by really quickly, and October's been cray-cray. It is the month of October. So we'll be doing a Halloween episode and really looking into sort of the origins of Halloween, and with maybe a specific focus into sort of the Irish background of Halloween.
I love it.
Yeah. And then also pairing it with spooky Halloween ghost stories.
So excited.
Things that happened on Halloween. Yeah.
I love that. I'm so excited.
It's going to be good.
I'm so excited. Okay.
I also have to tell you, at some point, I went on that ghost adventure.
Oh.
I went on my own ghost adventure.
Okay.
So that's going to be discussed. Like, I talked to ghosts.
So maybe you can open up your Halloween episode with that. And I'm very, like, don't tell me in advance. Like, I want to hear it fresh.
No, I'm not going to tell you anything.
Okay.
I'm not going to tell you one single thing.
Yay! I'm excited.
Yay!
Okay.
Okay, cool.
Thanks for joining me, and
yeah,
happy lunch break, and I'm going to go clean my house.
Cool. I will text you what might work for the next recording day.
Okay. Bye.
Okay.